subcommittees haven't even had time to have items on an agenda, let alone meet about it.
Whoops. Hold on. Are there any places where the public can view the notes from meetings?
Notes from meetings, I mean,
or like agendas,
right,
like that
so
type
yeah,
of thing.
so the Worcester Public Schools website always posts the agendas ahead of time. For our school committee, they go up on the Friday before our meetings, which are on Thursdays. So we'll meet next Thursday, so the next full committee agenda will be up on Friday, usually around 4. Subcommittee, and then once the meeting has happened, the minutes get posted later. So you can actually go on the school committee section of the Worcester Public Schools website and find the minutes from all of our meetings that have already happened.
All right. Is there any news the schools will stay closed later or opened earlier?
No, the latest is what Governor Baker issued on Sunday night, which was in line with what Worcester had already decided, which was April 6th. I mean, there's certainly lots of discussion in various places. I saw a recommendation from the CDC. I guess it came out, I think, either yesterday or the day before, suggesting that schools would need to stay closed at least 8 weeks. And obviously Boston and Everett both are closed through the end of April already. So that's Boston and Everett together are about 5% of the student body of the public schools in Massachusetts. So I would assume that any state decision is going to keep in mind that those kids are staying out already regardless.
I heard from somewhere that they could close for the year. There was like I've never heard anything for that,
so,
but I've just heard it.
I will say that no one is making that decision yet, but I think that anyone who's involved in public education has probably at least had that passing thought that this could be it, if you look at the timeline of the pandemic in places that are ahead of us.
What is the public schools doing for students to learn remotely?
So the first thing that I think is important for people to understand is that Massachusetts public schools don't have a remote learning provision. So in other words, we can't run school remotely except for there's 2 virtual charter schools, and then there's a couple of schools out in Franklin County that have kind of an exception for this year because they were piloting snow day provisions. That pilot's now canceled because the state was finding that it was inequitable to students who had special needs, and they also had concerns about access. So the first thing that people should know is that it's really about learning rather than about credit, which is sort of a tough distinction, I think, depending on who you are. I don't know of any district that isn't providing some way for students to be learning. Certainly Worcester did 2 things. First of all, there was a lot of work that was done last week on putting a bunch of information and materials on our online platform. So there's a link right off the front page of our website. However, probably more than a quarter of our students don't have online access at home.
Yeah.
So we made it a blanket policy, or not policy, but a blanket decision that every student would get work on paper, regardless of whether they had online access or not, because we can't assume that they do.
All right. Any policies that could potentially come out in the coming weeks?
So, I mean, the first thing that's happened is that we're already operating under a state that's in a state of emergency. So there are already changes that have happened at the state level that impact us. So for example, Governor Baker suspended portions of the open meeting law, which allows committees to essentially be meeting virtually. You'd be amazed at the number of adults, for example, who in the past 3 days have learned Zoom.
My whole school has accounts on here, and I have to do, my doctor has sent like things out. Doctor's appointments are on Zoom now too.
There you go. Yeah. So there's going to be school committee meetings and city council meetings and all kinds of other public meetings that generally we have a fairly strict open meeting law. They had to happen together. They had to happen in person, and they had to be open to the public. And now essentially you need to be providing public access in some way that is free. So in some cases that's involving things like Facebook Live. In some cases it's involving Zoom. It's in some cases it's honestly just involving an open phone line or local cable access. So that has already happened at the state level, but that will impact what we're doing at the local level. In terms of decisions that we're going to be making, there's a bunch of decisions that really were already made, administration decided that we're paying all employees who work for us full-time, for full school year, whether they're hourly employees or salaried employees, for the next 3 weeks that we don't have school. In terms of what the school committee is going to need to do, I'm sure that there's a lot of just updating what's going on. The big thing that's looming for Worcester is that our next meeting, which was next week, was supposed to be focused on our approving the plan for the additional funding that's come through as part of the Student Opportunity Act. The administration was supposed to, I know this week in particular, be really focusing on writing that plan. There is some intimation that the legislature is in the process of potentially passing something that would change the deadline, because obviously every administration of the state instead is focusing on closing down their schools, getting their schools cleaned, and making sure that students are getting fed, and if it's possible to give them access to learning, doing that. So part of the question, I think, for us this week will be if the legislature passes something that changes that deadline, because that will then change our meeting next week.
Most challenging aspect of this whole thing?
Oh, wow. I think up until probably this weekend, it was having people take it seriously. I think I spend a lot of time following national and international news. So when I saw the schools starting to close down in China, and then when they started to close down in Europe, I knew that something serious was happening.
Yeah.
I think that there were a lot of people who tried to dismiss it pretty early on, and I feel like that pushed us back pretty far.
A lot of people, even in Worcester, dismissed it really early.
Yes, right. And obviously that will have consequences. At this point, I think that we've made progress on that. I did see some research that suggested that having the schools closed sort of mentally makes a difference for people.
Yeah.
And I think that may have happened here too. Part of it is it's about sort of dealing with the consequences of not having human contact in various kinds of ways, right? So there's a lot of students who depend on us for a lot of different kinds of things, from medical care to obviously their education, to feeding, to all of those kinds of things. We also have lots and lots of parents and lots of families that sort of live right on the edge, and they're hourly workers. They might lose jobs, they might lose housing, and the question is whether or not a lot of our students really have a safe place to be right now.
That's not really. That's more state people. Has the Worcester government been in contact with state and or federal employees and government?
Both. Yeah, no, and particularly on the school side, because we're so both heavily funded and heavily regulated by both the federal and state government. One of the things that actually has impressed me is there are a number of exceptions and waivers that had to be granted in order for us to do the feeding program the way that we're doing it. Usually you have to eat on site in particular locations, and essentially they let us switch to our summer locations and let kids take food away, which usually isn't allowed, and they did it really fast. I think that most
What does that feeding program involve?
So there's something like 33 sites across the city. There's a schedule, which is on the Worcester Public School website, and it's been pretty widely shared on social media, that gives the schedule of our 3 feeding trucks every day starting at about 10:30. Each of them makes a route through the city, and stops at various locations for about a half hour each. Any child who is, anyone, I should say, 18 or younger can show up and get lunch. You don't have to show up. You don't have to show ID. You don't have to be a Worcester Public School student. You just have to be under 18, and you'll have lunch. And I know they're working on expansion. There's been some conversation about whether or not we could also do breakfast. But do go look for that, absolutely, if you're under the age of 18, because we show up and we will feed you.
Okay. Any news from the state and local or federal governments? What's
things
that are going around?
I think there's a lot of things that are supposed to happen in the spring that I know students and teachers are wondering about. I immediately got questions about, we had to cancel the SAT, for example, on Saturday here in Worcester. It was supposed to happen at Doherty. AP tests, obviously, are a question. College Board is talking about whether or not they can expand the window, have it taken at home. Is it going to be fair for people who haven't been in school? Obviously, for the public school system, the MCAS is huge, and there's going to be no school in Massachusetts that's actually in session on March 24th, which is when the 10th graders were supposed to be taking the ELA. So obviously something will be happening there. Now, the federal government did offer to allow states to apply for a waiver for the federal testing. We do not yet know if that is happening in Massachusetts. But clearly something's going to happen. And the question is kind of what it is. And I don't know when we'll be hearing on that. But that definitely is something that we're watching for. There's also a bunch of other kinds of deadlines that are happening, building committees and there's a building deadline that's supposed to happen in the next couple of weeks, the SOA, like I talked about. So I think that there's a bunch of stuff like that where we're going to sort of, we should be doing stuff in the next couple of weeks that we're not going to be able to do. What are they going to do about
it? Let's see. Have you been in contact directly with the governor, or just kind of in general the state government? I haven't been in direct contact with the governor. I have been in direct contact with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which I partly do as part of my job. I work for the School Committee Association, so in some ways I'm sort of a state level person already. I've also been in contact with the Mass Building Authority because I was getting some questions about whether or not the school building deadlines were going to change. I reached out to Jim McGovern last week with a question around college students that were trying to get home to Europe. And also I know his office is always active anytime we're trying to change things around the school feeding program, because he's very active in terms of making sure that people in general get fed. I'm trying to think if there's any other contacts that I've made. Has he responded to you?
Yes, his office did get back to me when we were talking about this. Yes, absolutely. In fact, honestly, everyone's gotten back to me.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And he's very good. Like, I serve on his youth cabinet. He's very good and in tune with needs.
Yes.
Let's see. What have you been working on most to help combat the virus in Worcester?
Misinformation.
Either personally or on committees.
Really misinformation and trying to get good information out, and not just about the seriousness of the disease and things like social distancing, but like, are kids required to have work, and what exactly are we doing about paying people, and all of those kinds of things, and fighting to try to make sure that whatever we do is as fair to as many people as possible. There's lots of districts around now that are saying, well, can't we just switch everybody to an online platform, and can't we just do school online? And the idea of the fact that not everybody lives in a house and not everybody has their own bedroom or their own living space, and that kids aren't gonna, that families that are concerned about their own safety or security aren't gonna try to say, yes, let's sign up for internet. A lot of that kind of stuff, I think, is what I've been spending most of my time on.
That's what my school does. Like, we have an online portal and stuff, emails, like that type of stuff. But like Worcester, 25,000 kids, where a ton of people don't even, we were just talking about it, like Worcester, we were saying they might not close because, well, obviously they did, but because of the online, and students, a big fraction of them don't have online.
Mhm. Right. I mean, and New York City, for example, held out a very, very long time because they've got over 100,000 students that are homeless. So if you close
Mm,
school and students are homeless, where do they go exactly? So
I know, and then
yeah,
they're closing like libraries,
Mhm.
shelters. Like
Right.
shelters, I'm sure they're gonna like start regulating some stuff, so it's just tricky. Um, any advice or guidelines for people to, kind of follow?
Um, I mean, I will reiterate that make sure you're getting good information. I won't tell you that you only need to, go to the Worcester website and the, Telegram for that. But if you're hearing something that you're wondering about, check in with someone. The city officials are getting daily briefings, so usually we're a pretty good source. Um, by all means, please abide by. I mean, my family's joking that they're under quarantine, but we're leaving the house. So, but I mean, do you really be thoughtful about? Do you need to leave? What are you doing? That kind of thing. The time for going out and socializing is over. And in particular, and I say this as someone who has been trapped in houses with small children before, I know that you want to like go out and take them to the playground or whatever. If you take them outside and let them run around, please make sure that they're away from other people.
Yeah.
Not because your own kids are necessarily going to get sick, because in many cases, the children don't get particularly sick, but because that's actually how we spread the illness. And for students, it's funny, I've never seen so many educators online encouraging their students to please go on social media, connect through connect through whatever you
I
want to
know.
connect through. Be thoughtful about what you share, but don't actually try to have get-togethers of various kinds in person, because that's exactly how we make other people sick.
Yeah. And lastly, any additional information,
Um,
if you have
just
any?
to try to watch out for each other, and try to give each other every consideration. There's a lot of people who are working really hard right now, whether officially or unofficially, to try to do all they can. And obviously, there are places where I think leadership has failed us, but there's also a lot of sort of kind of quiet things that are happening where people are scrambling really hard to do really basic, important kinds of things, like everyone from those who are finding vaccines to those who are trying to open source ventilators to those who are
Hmm.
volunteering space if we need additional hospitals. I mean, I was just talking to some schools, some of the school secretaries who have been trying to make sure that their meetings are still public and that kind of thing, even though people are staying away from each other. So
Hmm.
the more sort of effort and support we can give to each other, even while we're doing it virtually, is important. And consider also things like who loses out from something like this, and can you go
Hmm.
order from your local bookstore or get takeout from your local Chinese place, those kinds of things.
Yeah. One more thing I want to add. So I'm sure you've seen President Trump talk over the
Not
past
if
few
I can
days
help
on. I'm sure there's many
it.
people who say that. What's your kind of over the past few days? He's kind of shifted from a relax, it's fine attitude to this is something serious that we need to watch.
Yes.
What's your response to like some of his things? Like he posted this yesterday, like 15 days to
I mean,
cut.
the first thing is he needs better advisors in terms of we're not switching to
Yeah,
homeschooling. That's not happening. I'd say it's about time. It's about time, because if we had national action last week, would we be in a very different place? I think so.
hmm,
So welcome aboard. Many of us have been working on this for a while now.
yeah,
Also, his administration, in my perspective, has done an enormous amount to discredit credible media. And right now,
hmm.
we are
I definitely
enormously
agree with that.
yeah, and we're enormously dependent on things like the reports that are coming out of other countries right now to be able to figure out how best we can respond. And the fact that he's
Yeah,
taught us not to believe them, or has tried to, is enormously harmful. So that's really a problem.
yeah. Like whoops, not that. Hold on, I have one more thing to show you
Of
that
course.
I saw yesterday from the president.
Hmm.
Let's see. Search. Kind of going on with what we were saying about the media.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like his briefing today was definitely better than what it
Yes.
has been in the past couple of days. Like 2 days ago, he was like relaxed, like talking about CEOs all day long. And like, I
Yeah.
definitely think these things that he's put out
Mhm.
over the past few days has definitely helped. But like, let me find it because I saw this last night. I'm like, is this man serious right now? And I replied to it. I'm like, is this man, the president of the United States, serious right now?
Yeah, no, yesterday and today his briefings were much more in contact with reality. So that, I mean, that does make me
Yeah,
wonder what happened. Yeah.
yeah. Like if someone my family was talking about this at dinner last night. Did someone say, if you don't start this, this could be something for your reelection? Like just joking about it, and we were like, which probably wasn't the idea because it's more than just a reelection. It's watching out for your whole country that you're responsible for. But I don't know. It seems like something different happened. So this is what I wanted to show you. He said the Times a disgrace to journalism because there was an article from someone saying the New York Times spreads fake news.
That's not
And then
helpful.
he wrote this, and within this time where we need to depend on things like the New York Times, like I was like, the New York Times, along with many things like CNN
Yep.
and all these things which he puts
Yep.
down, exhibit like high standards. And this is unlike Fox, which is conservative.
Mhm. It's very harmful.
But it's the newspaper.
You're talking to her right now?
On Zoom.
You asked her for an interview? Indeed, she's not public, she's public school.
All right. So that's all I have.
Great.
Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. Anytime. If you need more information, you know where we are.
All right. Thank you very much.
Or take care.
Bye.